Hello and welcome to Personal Finance. I'm Kukuletu Cele. No couple is perfectly matched when it comes to money. And when two partners find themselves on opposite financial spectrums, the occasional financial tiff is inevitable. Joining me now for a look at how to manage your finances as a couple is Frank Magwegwe, Segment Chief Executive for Momentum Retail. Good to have you with us on this interesting topic, Frank. Good
to have me on the show. Thank you very much. Really interesting and appropriate given the month of February.
Exactly. The month of love, and some say the month of divorce too. But let's start on the good news story first. So you meet someone you like and the conversations get underway and the relationship seems fairly serious, but obviously there's an element of yours, mine, and ours. Is that the typical debate or the way the issues initially start for many couples when it comes to a lack of financial planning?
Absolutely, Gugu. It has to start there because, you know, this topic, just thinking about it as I was driving here, just really took me down memory lane. You know, I've been married for 17 years now.
Wow.
And, you know, what I can tell you from my experience there is really that when I was there still dating and we thinking about getting married.
Did you pay for lunch?
I did, thank you. But I honestly thought, Gugu, that the only thing needed to hold us together was love. Fast forward 17 years later, I can certainly say I've added another one, which is to say you have to be on the same page financially. You've got to be in sync financially as another element of keeping a marriage together. So right before marriage, partners must be open to discussing their finances. I would almost want to use a term, you know, be financially intimate, to just understand, you know, who has what, and even that whole discussion which, you know, some couples don't want to go into around the prenup, for example. Those are discussions that needs to take place before, you know, the wedding if a viewer is a married young couple.
I want us to talk about this financial intimacy because clearly the personalities also need to match. Some people are big spenders and some people are Scrooges who count every single penny. Are those basically the leading indicators basically when you enter into a relationship to look out for and to discuss, like you say?
Absolutely, Gugu. I think each individual going into that relationship, a marriage relationship, you really need to understand. Obviously we've got, as you say, you know, the extremes where we've got Scrooges counting, you know, every penny. And then you've got really the big, you know, free spenders. And then most people are in between. So that discussion to just try to ascertain, you know, in that spectrum, where am I as a partner? And then combined as a unit, where are we? And how do we make sure that as a unit, we remain where we are in terms of having those discussions when big purchases come up.
So we're a couple, we're talking about our finances. Is the perfect starting point to do this together and then seek financial advice?
One of my favorite questions, Gugu. So if I can just quickly touch on three things for me that are critical. One, you've touched on it. You've got to discuss. Are we going to have joint accounts or not? That's one way of doing it. Or no joint accounts. Or thirdly, somewhere in between, where some responsibilities are one partner's and then some are the others, then there's somewhere in between where I do my own things in, you know, in private. So each one of those has its own pros and cons, as in anything. As a financial advisor, from my own personal experience, when as a, you know, newly young married man, we started the joint accounts. Over time, they create their own problems. So as a couple, we then decided that, you know, it was best if each person has their own account, and then we spread the expenses amongst ourselves on some sort of, you know, on some sort of ratio.
On the topic of joint accounts there, sorry to interrupt there, but I just want to understand, some say that there's different criteria as compared to what our international counterparts do. In other words, one signing power, partner will have more signing authority or power versus another. Are there certain nitty-gritties like that to look into before you make such a decision?
The main issue, yes, there are some issues around, you know, the signing of the who signs in terms of the account, whether you're getting your, you know, your bank cards and that sort of thing. But broadly, you know, the main thing really is when you are running a joint account, as the name suggests, you know, money going in and out of the accounts and transaction going in are the joint responsibility of the two parties. I think that's quite important, Google, to understand, because what that means is, for example, let's take a credit rating, right? When there is one partner overspending and maybe the other partner only realizes later when they check the account, those two partners are jointly responsible for that account. So that's one of the disadvantages, especially if you are on that extreme of somebody who's really saving and somebody who's spending, that, you know, the impact of one's partner decisions can affect the credit rating of two parties. Then the last point I would also say to take into account, over and above the decisions made jointly, is also something that most partners don't take into account when you make that decision of a joint account, is credit history. That when you go in, especially newly married, we start that account together, as an individual, you probably don't have any substantial credit record. If you were a student, you probably, maybe bought a few, clothes at a retailer or that sort of thing, or a little bit of rent if you're not staying in res. But you don't have enough of a credit record that banks need to be able to give you loans. So also, partners need to take that into account. You want to have this combined joint history without each individual having their own.
Let's delve into that one, because it raises a very controversial topic, STDs, sexually transmitted debt.
Okay.
How do we deal with that? Especially, exactly, especially when one is moving towards having a more serious relationship, as you alluded to, cohabitation or either marriage. The disclosure there, how important is it, and the credit ratings and the records, how does that also influence each other?
Absolutely critical. So I almost would say, as really things get serious, and the guys are deciding they want to get married, I think it's absolutely critical. I know, maybe coming from a financial planner, one would say, this financial planner, they're expected to say that. But I would almost say it's absolutely critical to get a credit report. From the big companies out there in South Africa, you can get for free one credit report a year to actually say, before we tie the knot, I just want to understand, the financial status of my loved one, and then the other person does the same as well. I think that is important, and that sets the tone in the family for that intimacy around financials, to be able to talk about financials. Because if you walk in, this person has got this debt that you are not aware of, you're now married, you go into a joint account, that can create all sorts of problems into the marriage. In fact, I read a report that in the US, they say married couples argue about money at least 3 times per month. I haven't been able to see similar research in South Africa, but I don't think it will be much different.
I think you're quite right on that one. I've heard a few tips myself with regard to the financial power play, but something else that relates to debt and two people sharing their money is the lending, whether it comes to your friends or your family. But if my brother has a flat tire and needs some emergency funds, and I share that money with him, should I be worried about my partner's reaction, especially if we haven't spoken about it?
So, in the marriage, what becomes critical for me is really 3 things, and I'll touch on what you've just read, Gugu. Now, so the first thing is around, let's have a common understanding of our goals as a household. Where are we going, right? You might have somebody who's saving money because they want to start a business, let's say the husband, and then the wife is not aware of that, and she's just saying, let's go to holiday in Thailand as an example. So let's understand our goals as a house, budget together, quite critical. Discuss big purchases together. Those are almost the 3 foundations. So for me, coming back to your question, the reason I felt after about 5 years of marriage and we were on a joint account, we moved away, it's exactly for the reason that you have mentioned. As a young couple, we're finding lots of extended family looking upon to us, being first to get a degree in my own household, lots of expectations. And we realized when I took money and gave it to extended family, it was something that just caused friction in our household. So we then ended up saying, let's go in between, where we agree on the main purchases. If it's repaying of a house, repaying of a car, school fees, for example, we split those in a ratio of how much we brought in as income.
Give us an example there. So if you're earning 10,000 Rand versus your partner who's earning 15,000, you would split it according to that ratio?
So we simply said, okay, so our combined income, let's say one is bringing 20, the other one is bringing 10. So it's a third and 2/3. And we simply use that ratio to say, if you're bringing in a third, you're going to take a third of the household expenses. I bring in 2/3, I'm going to take 2/3. And the beauty of that, what it did for me, was that all of a sudden, once we agree on those combined, whether a small decision, such as giving a cousin 1,000 Rand, I didn't need to go and discuss it with my wife. I had that freedom of doing, and she also felt the same in terms of the main things. We're covering them together. I don't need to always consult with my husband or wife on other decisions such as supporting extended family. So that is what worked for us in terms of a way of main expenses. We share on some sort of ratio, and then the balance, you can use your money as you see fit.
I want to come back to the worst case scenario where we have a couple where one is financially savvy. They grew up in a household where they've been taught to save, to have some kind of investment vehicle, to budget and also plan their finances according to a goal, versus the free-spirited individual who is just carefree with their money and lives by the title that you only live once and you need to enjoy what you can whilst you can. To that couple that's watching tonight, your advice to them?
That one is a challenging situation, Gugu, and I'd say two things in terms of what I would advise them as a financial planner. The first thing I would say is budget together. What do I mean by that, Gugu? Sometimes the word budget is so thrown around so often that we don't quite understand what does it mean when a financial planners tell me to budget. A budget is simply a spending plan. So we're saying this is what's coming from the husband, this is what's coming from the wife. Let's put it together. And then let's understand what we need to spend money on. So they would need to have open and honest discussions around that. Then for me, the second thing would be to agreeing on the big purchases. To say when we need to, let's have a discussion and agreement when we need to go for big purchases. And underlying all that, for the partner who doesn't have that foundation of money management, as I like to call it, it's really important for the other partner to almost take them on the journey of financial management. Just help them. Why is it important to budget? Why do we need to plan? If kids are going to be in school, help them understand inflation, cost of goods, and those sort of things. So you really would need to be patient with them to just give them those basics of managing money and finances, before you really, start trying to hold them to every penny, as far as a budget is concerned.
I want to throw a spanner into the works and include children, in particular from an external relationship or previous relationship. Are the contributions that the one spouse or party makes to the child that isn't necessarily biologically theirs part of maintenance on their partner's part?
I come across that question quite a lot, Google, in my practice as an advisor. And what I advise my clients to do, and sometimes they haven't done it, so you now tell them how to manage monies in terms of the question you've asked. But in instances like that, where maybe somebody's divorced or there's other kids that I look after, that's where, just as a start for me, I advise that the partners must consider a prenup. Okay, I think it's quite important for that, because if for this money that's coming from maintenance, it's not really part of this new family, right? So suppose in the question that you've just asked that they didn't have a prenup in place and this is what's happening. What I would encourage in that household would really be to say this money that's coming from maintenance, it's really to support the children, if they're children from another marriage. Therefore, when budget is being run for the house, that income should not be part of the income of the household from a budget perspective. It almost must just come in and you're saying this is specifically for kids, John and Paul and Spogazi. We're going to help them with the following with this money. We can't budget and plan our lives including money that's coming from maintenance, for example. Difficult to say than done, but that's definitely what I encourage my clients to do.
Exactly. Frank, it's always fantastic speaking to you. I think we've got the 3 main pointers from you. Number 1, budget.
Yes.
Reach an agreement and have a goal in mind.
Absolutely. And communication, I think that's the last one that I'll add to that. Just constantly communicating about finances in the household.
So I need to make a call about those new shoes I want.
Absolutely.
On that note, Frank, it's always a pleasure having you with. That's it for Personal Finance this evening. Thank you very much to Frank Magwegwe, Segment CEO for Momentum Retail. Remember that we'd love to hear from you and maybe some interesting financial relationships that you have for us. You can tweet at CNBC Africa using the hashtag Finance410 or to myself at Gukumfupi on Twitter. Until tomorrow evening, it's goodbye for now.